The Galactic Council had made many demands before. Empires had cowered, civilizations had crumbled, and species had vanished under the sheer economic and military pressure they wielded. When they spoke, the stars themselves seemed to listen. But humanity? Humanity didn't kneel. High Chancellor Extor of the Galactic Council sat upon his grand seat, staring at the holographic transmission flickering before him. It displayed the Earth ambassador, a middle-aged human with sharp blue eyes and an expression that seemed too calm. His name was Daniel Kessler. "We appreciate your offer," Kessler said smoothly, fingers interlocked on his desk. "But Earth will not be complying with your request." The chamber of the Galactic Council, an enormous structure the size of a city floating over the core world of Zavoria Prime, fell into stunned silence. Counselors of every species turned to one another in confusion, their bioluminescent communication flickers shifting to deep reds of disbelief. "Perhaps you misunderstand," Chancellor Extor said, his voice measured but laced with condescension. "This is not a request. It is a demand. The Galactic Council has decreed that Earth must surrender 15% of its annual resource production, industrial materials, refined metals and technology patents, as part of its formal recognition as a galactic power." Kessler tilted his head slightly as if considering the words. "Extortion. You're trying to extort humanity." Extor leaned forward, his chitinous fingers steepled. "We call it ensuring interstellar stability." There was a brief pause. Then Kessler smiled. Not a nervous smile, nor an uncertain one. It was sharp. Almost amused. "You assume we fear instability," Kessler said. The counselors shifted uneasily. Extor cleared his throat, a guttural clicking noise. "Ambassador, you will reconsider? We have seen civilizations much greater than yours collapse under sanctions and embargoes. Our influence spans thousands of worlds. Our fleets patrol every known sector. Humanity is a newcomer. Your people are outnumbered, outgunned, and economically vulnerable. Your military fleet is more than you think," Kessler interrupted. His voice was still polite, but the amusement was gone. Extor frowned, his mandibles twitching. "Do you really think you can defy us?" Kessler exhaled softly, then leaned forward. His next words changed the course of history. "We aren't defying you, Chancellor," he said. "We're laughing at you." The transmission cut. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council chamber was dead silent. Then the alarm started blaring. Humanity's reply had just sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had never been ignored before. The silence following Earth's response lasted only minutes before the Council erupted into chaos. Every representative of the major interstellar powers spoke at once, their voices blending into a cacophony of disbelief, fury, and confusion. "Have they lost their minds?" bellowed an Erdhaki delegate, his massive reptilian form trembling with anger. "The humans have no leverage. They will comply or they will be crushed," hissed a Zender diplomat, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing in warning patterns. Chancellor Extor slowly rose from his seat, his compound eyes narrowing. He tapped a single claw against the metal podium. Silence. The chamber fell still. "They have made their choice," Extor declared. "Now we shall make ours." A series of decisions were made within minutes, faster than any ruling in Council history. Humanity was to be economically suffocated. Their trade routes were to be severed. Their banking networks locked out. Their shipments impounded at every interstellar port. Every allied species was expected to comply. The Council had crushed civilizations before with nothing but paperwork. By the end of the hour, the sanctions were fully implemented. And yet, something was wrong. 1 month later, the sanctions backfire. Chancellor Extor expected Earth to beg. He expected their economy to collapse overnight. Instead, the reports flowing into the Council chambers made no sense. Trade data suggested that the human economy was expanding. Industrial production had tripled. Smugglers reported that Earth's black market had become the most profitable in the sector. Even worse, several of the Council's own member species were quietly defying the sanctions to trade with humanity. Extor stared at the intelligence reports in disbelief. "Explain this," he demanded. The economic minister, a frail-looking Zavorian with nervous energy, cleared his throat. "The humans adapted, Chancellor. Unlike other species, their economy wasn't entirely dependent on interstellar trade. They have extensive self-sufficient industries. They also leveraged a system they call gray markets, routing goods through third-party nations and private traders." "How?" Extor snarled. The minister swallowed. They bribed everyone. A hush fell over the chamber. Exorvatek's mandibles twitched in disbelief. Are you telling me that the humans outmaneuvered the most sophisticated economic system in the galaxy with smugglers and corruption? The minister winced. Yes, Chancellor. But that wasn't the worst part. The real disaster came next. The sanctions were hurting the Council's own economies more than they were hurting Earth. Because humanity had something no other civilization had: war economies. When Earth realized they were being economically attacked, they didn't panic. They shifted into wartime production. Every factory, every assembly line, every resource was suddenly repurposed for a potential conflict. Humanity had always been a species that thrived under adversity, and instead of breaking, they expanded their industries at an unprecedented pace. And then came the final blow. The humans had turned sanctions into a weapon. Humanity's revenge, the resource trap. A sudden flood of cheap, highly advanced weapons began appearing across the galaxy. Black market traders, independent colonies, private mercenary groups. They all had one thing in common: they were being armed by humans. Council-controlled trade routes were being interdicted by human-built strike craft. Council-backed factions found their enemies suspiciously well-equipped with human-made weapons. One particularly devastating report detailed how a group of pirates, previously armed with outdated laser rifles, had somehow acquired human railgun technology and torn through an entire Council convoy. The Council was bleeding. And then the final message arrived. A short, encrypted transmission, delivered directly to Exorvatek's office. A single sentence. You thought you could starve a species that turns war into profit? Exorvatek's claws dug into his desk. He had underestimated humanity. Now the Council was at war with an enemy they couldn't control. And they had already lost the first battle. Chancellor Exorvatek had not known fear in a long time. Not when he orchestrated the downfall of the Gokari Empire. Not when he ordered the extinction of the Varak insurgents. Not even when he sanctioned the economic war on humanity. But now he felt something creeping into his cold, calculating mind. A sense of helplessness. Because the Galactic Council, the most powerful governing body in the known universe, was losing control. The sanctions meant to cripple Earth had backfired spectacularly. Entire trade routes were collapsing. Non-compliant worlds were rejecting Council authority. Human-manufactured weapons were flooding conflict zones, arming rebels, pirates, and rogue factions who would never have dared challenge the established order. And worst of all, the Council was running out of resources. It had never occurred to them that so much of their infrastructure relied on human-built technology. Their shipyards ran on human-engineered reactors. Their stations depended on human alloy composites. Their data networks used human-made quantum relays. Now, with humanity cut off, the Council's mighty fleets were sitting half-built in dry docks. Entire cities were going dark. Worlds were experiencing shortages. And in the shadow of this chaos, the humans moved. Humanity's next strike. The trade wars begin. The first reports came from the Perithian cluster. A massive human trade fleet, escorted by heavily armed privateers, had broken through Council-enforced blockades and reached key trading worlds. Within hours, they had signed exclusive trade pacts with dozens of planetary governments. Then came the Zilker Nebula. A vast network of human-aligned smugglers had completely overtaken the Council's former supply chains. They weren't just bypassing the embargo. They were replacing it. Within weeks, more than half of the Council's own members had secretly resumed trade with humanity. And then, the final humiliation. A high-ranking envoy from the Zender Dominion, the same species that had pushed hardest for sanctions, stood before the Council's assembly and formally announced. The Dominion recognizes that humanity's economy cannot be contained. As such, we will resume full diplomatic and trade relations with Earth. Shockwaves rippled through the chamber. The Council had spent centuries crushing rebellion, controlling economies, and dictating the fate of civilizations. And now, one of their own ruling factions had just openly defied them. Exorvatek sat motionless in his seat. He didn't react. He didn't speak. He merely stared at the massive holographic display in the Council chamber, where a single phrase scrolled across the latest intelligence reports. Humanity is winning. The final ultimatum: surrender or fight. Desperation led the Council to its last resort. A military option. Exorvatek gathered the remaining loyalist fleets, nearly 18,000 warships. A force so vast that it could annihilate any known empire. The plan was simple. A massive show of force above Earth. The Council would demand immediate surrender. Humanity would be given one last chance to submit. If they refused, the Council would burn Earth to ash. The fleet launched within the week. The countdown to humanity's final hour had begun. But Exorvatek had made one final mistake. He had assumed humanity was waiting to be attacked. He had never once considered that humanity might attack first. The Galactic Council's Grand Armada, 18,000 warships strong, had finally arrived in Sol. A force so vast, so overwhelming, that no species had ever dared stand against it. Until now. Above Earth, in the endless black void, the Council's warships arranged themselves in perfect formation. Dreadnoughts, carriers, battleships, every last weapon of war in their arsenal. From his command bridge, Chancellor Exorvatek gazed at the blue-green world below. His mandibles clicked anxiously. Humanity's defenses were unusual. No defensive battle stations. No planetary shield grids. No massive orbital fleets waiting for battle. It was too quiet. His second-in-command, High Strategist Lorvac, spoke in a low growl. They're not even attempting to negotiate. This is odd. Exorvatek narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. Then suddenly, every human satellite went dark. Every sensor, every communication relay shut off in an instant. The fleet's targeting systems glitched. Their energy readings fluctuated. The pristine battle formations wavered as confused captains tried to re-establish their links. And that's when Earth spoke. A single transmission, broadcasted across every Council warship. A human voice. Come. Measured. Cold. You shouldn't have come here. And then hell was unleashed. The end of the Grand Armada. From the dark side of the moon the first wave struck. Massive kinetic rods, solid tungsten, dropped from orbit at relativistic speeds, slammed into the Council fleet with the force of nuclear warheads. Before the first ships could react, thousands of AI-controlled missile swarms erupted from hidden launch sites across the solar system, cutting through Council ranks like a hurricane of fire. Human warships, smaller, leaner but faster and more advanced, decloaked in perfect ambush formation. Their weapons did not miss. The Council fleet, trained for traditional slow-moving wars, had no defense against this hyper-fast, precision-based slaughter. Ships exploded. Dreadnoughts shattered like glass. Command structures collapsed. Coordinated tactics turned to chaos. Admirals screamed into failing comms. Exorvatek watched in horror as his unstoppable armada became a graveyard of fire. Earth's final warning. Less than 2 hours after the battle began, it was over. The entire Grand Armada, 18,000 ships reduced to less than 200. Exorvatek's personal dreadnought was caught in the final wave of attacks. His escape pod barely made it out before the ship disintegrated around him. He drifted through space, staring at the ruins of his once great fleet. And then, another human transmission came through. This time the voice was mocking. Council forces, you are defeated. We could wipe out the rest of you now, but we won't. You have one chance. Go home. Tell the others. Humanity does not bow. Silence. Then the voice continued. And one more thing. Pause. Then in that same calm, eerie tone. Don't come back. The aftermath, the fall of the Council. The news spread like wildfire. The mighty Galactic Council, humiliated. Their Grand Armada, destroyed. The last remnants of their authority collapsed overnight. Rebellions erupted. Member states abandoned the Council in droves. Factions that had once feared them now saw an opportunity for power. Exorvatek, disgraced and broken, was arrested by his own government. And humanity? Humanity didn't celebrate. They didn't boast. They simply returned to business. Their message to the galaxy had been simple. Leave us alone. Or suffer the consequences. And the universe listened. The legend of Earth. Generations later, the battle would become a legend. A warning whispered in the halls of power. A shadow that loomed over every empire. Never start a war with humans. They'll annihilate you. And Earth? Earth remained silent. Watching. Waiting. Daring anyone to make the same mistake. Fire, if you love this story, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. Humanity always has another surprise. Rocket fire.